And so why don't we start with this, Dustin? Why don't we just give the audience some context, like how long in the business, what market are you in, level of production, just to kind of give people an idea.
Yeah. So I've been in the business. I technically got my license in that very end of 2022. 2023, I went into it full time. Now, that year of 2023, I wouldn't really consider it my first year of business, even though I was doing it full time just because, I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying a bunch of different things, watching YouTube videos, figuring out how to be a real estate agent.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the end of 2023 that I hired you as my coach, joined the first prospecting challenge in November of 2023. And that was my first cold call that I had ever made. Um, Kind of fast forward to now, a year later, 2024, we will have, by the end of this year, because we have a couple under contract right now, we will have had 12 sold transactions. Um, and the GCI will be just under 150 at 140. 140 will be my GCI
And
for 20.
what was your goal this year? Remind me of that.
My goal this year was to get to at least 12 transactions. So thankfully, I'm coming in clutch and hitting it right at the end. I'm sure we'll get to this throughout our conversation, but like this year was the journey that I'm sure a lot of agents in this community right now are going through, where there was a point in September where I felt like I wasn't going to hit that number. And you have a word for this. I forget what it is, but it's like that point where the agent feels like quitting almost, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the point where once you get past that, your growth explodes. And so that's kind of what happened this year. And like I said, I'm sure we'll get into it, but when I state those numbers, it sounds great. If I were to tell myself a year ago, I would have been like, great, that's all I wanted. I hit my goal, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. So
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And you're right. I think a lot of people in this business are on the verge of leaving, like they're teeter-tottering every day, every day. Should I keep going? Should I quit? Should I keep going? Should I quit? Because you're right. After the excitement of starting this has left them and they're in the trenches of actually doing it, we call that deception, right? Or conscious incompetence, where they're like, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought this was going to be. They start to have all this doubt creeps in. And we know that as soon as doubt creeps in, doubt typically takes over, doubt typically wins. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Were you earning six figures before you got into real estate, or is this your income on an upward trajectory?
no, absolutely. So in 2022, I made 65K. I was an accountant for like a big company, basically just a glorified bookkeeper. And 2023, I quit. I made $10,000 in 2023 as a real estate agent. And but I was pretty determined to make it work. So that's why I hired you. Um, and yeah, so I mean, this is one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about was like there from a return on investment standpoint, like if I had taken I don't even remember how much it was to hire you, but let's just say it was 10,000. I don't even know. If I'd put that in the stock market, something like that, maybe I get $1,000 return, whatever it is. But man, I got a 10x, more than a 10x improvement. I'd say that's a job well done.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate the kind words. And it's not necessarily like I can't take all the credit for that, and I don't want this episode to be about me because it's about you. But like you deserve the credit, right? Because I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people that I coach that aren't as coachable as you, where you had to do the hard part, right? My job is to outline and how to fast track to get you the results. You're the one that had to actually put in the work, put in the effort, grow the skill, keep going every single day when you felt like quitting. That's what today's episode's about. So let's talk about this transformation and what you're doing. So as we break down the business piece, what are the lead sources that you're finding the most success with right now?
Yeah, so more than 50% of my business is coming from expireds and canceleds. Um, I did, I call for sale by owners, but I've just seen a little bit less success with that. I think, there's a lot of things that I can improve there to try and dial that in more. I will say some of my business came from sphere of influence and past clients. some of the stats that I prepared here, though, that I found were really interesting, just kind of diving into my business. Um, I switched brokerages back in September, and that was a big part of like where I'm at now. And so I can talk about that if you'd like. But we just had a meeting as a brokerage last week or 2 weeks ago, and we're kind of talking about like, okay, what percentage of your business is listings versus buyers? And the person leading the group asked us to raise our hand, like, who knows the percentage? And I knew the percentage because I track my numbers. I raised my hand and he said, what's your percentage? And I said, 70% have been sellers, 30% have been buyers. And he was like shocked. He was like, wow, that's like really, really good. Ours is probably 50-50. And there were other people in the group that have been doing this for 10, 15 years. And they were the opposite. They're like 30% sellers and 70% buyers. And so, with that being said, even though I got a lot of business from Sphere of Influence as well as expireds and canceleds, 100% of the expired and canceled business was all listing based.
Mm.
Whereas my Sphere of Influence and everyone else in my office, because they all work Sphere of Influence, none of them do like expired listings or FISBOs, they might be on a 30-70 split. So when you talk about like time management, I'd
Yeah.
rather pour all of my focus into something that gives me a higher return on my time investment, which would be listings. And it just so happened to be that that was my number one source of listings taken as well.
Yeah,
So
that's great. You know, what would you, I'm curious how you would answer this. What about the agent who's listening to this or watching this who says, well, lucky for you, Dustin, I don't have any canceled, withdrawn, expireds in my market. What then sources would you work if that was you? Like,
yeah, great question. So one of the things that I've been implementing the past like month or two is putting more circle prospecting into my daily calls. So right now I spend the first hour of every day calling expireds and canceleds. The second hour I will call FISBOs, and the third hour I do circle prospecting. But when I say circle prospecting, I found a lot of success doing bullseye prospecting, meaning like calling homes around homes that I just barely sold. Especially because in our market right now, it is like it's slowing down just like it is across the nation.
yeah,
Our properties are still selling because of what you've taught us about, pricing property, being very intentional about it. And so when I make those calls to homeowners in that neighborhood, they're actually very impressed and they're interested to hear more. So I would say if you're not getting a lot of expired listings in your market, maybe just focus in on that. You're going to have a longer conversion cycle, but I mean, shoot, you can dial that in to be a 100% listing based business as well.
yeah. And again, you've heard me make the argument, though. It's like if you're going to have a business that is based more on like maybe pipeline lead sources like Bullseye or like downsizers, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, maybe it's a longer conversion cycle, but in the long term, I'd even challenge you with this. Do you wake up a year from now or 2 years from now saying, wow, I'm so grateful that I didn't get hooked on the expired business because as though, yes, it's a quick turnaround, it might not be the most ideal business if you could choose. Would you agree with that conceptually?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right. So with your lead generation, you have chosen to go all in on outbound prospecting via the phone. So you're cold calling homeowners. Of all the things out there, of all the shiny objects and all the options out there for agents, how did you land on this thing? And to your, I guess, credit, you've had a lot of success with it. So it's easy to say now, but it wasn't in the beginning. I mean, it was pretty hard in the beginning. So how did you, of all the things you could do, you said, well, I'm going to go do this cold calling thing. How did you come to that decision?
Yeah. So I would say 2023, like I talked about, that year was me trying to avoid everything but cold calling. Um, now, so I don't know, kind of going into 2024, I think my attitude had just kind of shifted where it was like, hey, I need to make this work. I know that what Brandon teaches works. I see people in this group succeeding. A big motivator to me was like Asher Black, the other guys in the group that are super young and absolutely crushing it. So to me, I was just, enough of this theory stuff. Let's just focus on the experience, people that are actually making it work right now. And that's, I think, something that helped me a lot, which was just getting to the point of like, I'm done listening to what I hope I don't offend anyone listening to this, but I'm done listening to like what Tom Ferry thinks is a good idea to market. I'm sure he has some great stuff, but it's like I'd rather listen to people that are doing it right now, that are young like me, maybe don't have a big sphere of influence and how they're succeeding. And it just can't kept coming back to making the calls.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's get into it. So you're doing right now 3 hours of proactive outbound prospecting for new business. In that 3 hours, you talked about the first hour being new, expired, cancel, withdrawn. The second hour being all for sale by owners. The third hour being circle prospecting, we'll call it demographic prospecting. Are there any other lead sources that you're calling? Are you calling old expireds? Are you calling anything else, or is it those are the main three sources?
Yeah, so I do call old expireds as well. So like past that third hour, if I have some time, I might start calling old expireds. Earlier in the year, I called a lot of old expireds and I kind of burned through a lot of my list. Now, I just need to get more old expireds. That's all it is. Because they're endless, you know what I mean? But
How far did you go back, and how far are you going to go back? Because you're right, they are endless if you keep going back. But
yeah.
how far did you go back so the audience can say, okay, give me some context there?
Yeah. So when I started, all that like Mojo or Vulcan, whoever it was that gave me the data, gave me was a year back. So I went
Mhm.
a year back. But for, yeah, like to your point, if I were to really dive into that lead source more, I would go for like 5 years back.
Yeah, yeah. And are you just to touch on that for a second? Old expireds are a lead source that we find great success with. I don't know if that's been the same for you. The conversations are better. There's a large portion of expired listings that don't re-enter the market right away. So how's that experience been for you?
Yeah, no, it's 100% true. And I think there's a temptation with when you're getting into expireds and cancels that you just don't continue to follow up. It's just like very churn and burn, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the listings that I have gone or gotten from expired listings, I contacted them at the beginning of the year, right? So
Mm,
that speaks to your point. Now, in terms of old expireds, there were a couple of listings that I closed at the beginning of the year that were like a year old.
yeah.
And so I think that it's crucial. Like I said, it's one of the things that I'd like to implement into my business more. But recently, what I've seen the most success from is finally implementing the calling the same day once the canceled hits the market. So Tucker talks a lot about this. There are a lot of people in the group that do it. It's my number one tip for people that aren't able to convert expired listings. Call them the exact same day they hit the market. Do not wait for the next morning because I'll tell you like probably 80% of my listings that I've closed that have been expired listings have been because of that.
Yep. Love it. Love it. So smart. Okay. And so you're prospecting about 15 hours per week. I made a post inside of our community and I asked people, hey, well, what was your number one business challenge in 2024? And like every year, the glaring problem that this industry has is being consistent. I mean, I don't know. There was a couple hundred things. So like talk to the audience about how you are, because you weren't always consistent. I remember in a coaching conversation, we had the same exact conversation about being consistent and the amount of effort you got to put forth, where now I think you're a lot more consistent than you were. How did you get to that point? What can you share with the audience who's sitting there saying, you know, some weeks are good and some weeks are bad. Sometimes I prospect, sometimes I don't. And most of the times I don't. How have you been able to be so consistent?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like there's no secret answer to that. Like it really depends a lot on what your attitude and your type of personality, things like that. But for me, a big thing has been eliminating how like as many distractions as I can possible. So I mentioned this earlier, but in September I switched brokerages, and a big part of that decision was because before I was kind of at a like a discount brokerage, if you will. And it was great because I was keeping more of my commission, but I had to work from home. And we just had our first girl. She just hit a year old. So um, getting like working from home and having a little girl running around has gotten like more and more distracting. I love her to death. And so like that was a big, huge thing for me was just switching brokerages, so that I could go into the office, have a place to separate work from home,
Mm.
and just dial in and completely focus. Um, that's been a huge, huge, huge thing for me. I would say also just like sticking to a routine, getting in the habit of going to the gym, waking up at a certain time, and then just making that your life. You know what I mean? Like it's just easier to keep going once you've started than it is to start up. So this like constant, I'm going to prospect and I'm going to stop prospecting, then prospect again. It's just so much harder than if you were to just consistently prospect, you
Yeah,
know?
the start stop is such an energy vampire that it's actually easier just to keep moving forward because of all the mental energy that it zaps from you, you know? And we all know this, but like we just are just a mere reflection of our habits, right? So like it's amazing that your transformation has been what it's been, but that's not because of, like, to your point, one big secret that the audience is going to get other than you've been really, really consistent. Okay. 15 hours a week. How many conversations are you typically having per week?
Shoot, I didn't grab that.
Well, how many per day on average?
Yeah. So typically I try and shoot for 20. I will say since I've been doing circle prospecting, it's been a lot easier to get to 20. So,
Yeah.
but if we just go off of 20, then that would be,
100 a week.
100 a week. Yeah.
Yeah. So 100 a week or 400 a month, right? I want to just give the audience some context around your numbers and your conversion so that we can break down some of the tactical things that you're doing. So 100 contacts per week, 400 a month. How many leads are you typically generating per day?
Yeah, great question. So this is really cool. I didn't grab per day, but I mean, if I were to, I could work back the numbers to figure out per day. But I
Do
did,
you have your monthly numbers? Is that what you have?
yeah. So I have my year to date numbers, and then I have my September to December numbers because I wanted to compare since I've
Mm.
made major changes in my business. But this was a really interesting statistic. Every 1.5 hours spent prospecting, a lead is generated on average, right? Over the full year to date numbers. So some days I won't have a single lead generated, but on average, every 1.5 hours spent prospecting, a lead is generated. So if we use those numbers, I mean, 2 leads per day, I guess would be the average,
I
right?
mean, that's phenomenal. And that's why I just love this approach to lead generation because it's like, what else could you do? Even if you're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars per day, you still couldn't generate a lead for every hour.
Yeah.
You
And
still wouldn't. Mhm.
yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
the crazy thing, Brandon, is so I pulled my GCI for the and we can get into net numbers too. Thankfully, I kept my expenses pretty low that my net income is, I think, more than what it would have been. Um, but my value per lead, if you take those year to date numbers, each lead has a value of $732.
Unbelievable. So
And so if
cool.
you think about that, like if you just spend an hour and a half prospecting, on average, you get a lead every hour and a half. Think about the cash that's potentially getting deposited into your bank account every time you do that.
And just for the audience that may not know how to do that or how you came up with that number, how did you get to that? How did you come up with that conversion or calculation?
Yeah. So you just take your GCI. So let's say for easy numbers, it's 100 grand, right? And then divide it by how many leads you have or
That's right.
that rated over that period of time.
Yeah. Awesome. So how many leads is that for you year to date?
Yes. So let's see. Year to date, I've generated 109 or sorry, 191 leads.
191 leads. Okay, great. And then from there, how many appointments have you set?
Appointment set would be 90,
And then appointments met
37.
and then taken?
Listings taken 7.
Got it. And we talked about sold. You're going to end up at, would you say 12?
12. Yeah.
All right. So let's break this down. So first, let's talk about the conversation. What can you share with people that are listening to this around these conversations you're having with people over the phone? You're having 100 a week. You're having a lot of conversations that you would look back over the course of the last 6 to 12 months and say, okay, these are the techniques. These are the sales skills that you've learned that have made the biggest difference when you're having these conversations.
Yeah. I would say recently it's been very much like the negative presumptive questions that you teach, right? And so almost I've been trying to in conversations with other agents, I try and like put up this picture in our mind of, our goal as we're prospecting, you call it like sorting gumballs, right? To me, another visual that works is before I'm going to meet with anyone, I need to close every single door that is potentially open for them to not work with me, if
That's
that
right.
makes sense.
In
And
other
so
words, so real quick, let me put a cherry on that. In other words, your approach to conversation is actually looking for all of the reasons as to why someone would not work with you and
yeah,
closing those one at a time. And then at the end of that conversation, if there are no doors left open, there's nothing but their opportunity to work with you. Is that right?
exactly. In fact, I kind of have a cool story about this. Just the other month, a couple weeks ago, I closed on a transaction, and that she was an expired listing. She told me that right after I called her, like 20 other realtors called her. She continued to get calls every day, right?
Yeah.
She said that every single person that called, she would not listen to them because of one thing that I said over the phone. And was that I presented the idea that, she may want to just rent this property out because she had already moved out.
Mm,
And she said that when you said that, it proved to me that you were not trying to earn yourself a commission. Rather, you were just trying to help me out.
there you
And so
go.
I think just like thinking of it that way, of trying to figure out if this person, even if it makes sense for them to work with me, just leads to a better rapport and better result.
Yeah. Instead of, and so in other words, to even further this for people that are like, okay, well, what does all that mean? Instead of trying to search for like how to get the person to say yes to you, you're actually navigating all the reasons why somebody would say no to you. So in the example you talked about of renting it, right? So
Mhm.
one thing that someone could say to you is, listen, we're no longer selling, we're going to rent it out, right? And so what you've done is you're the one inviting all of these things, and you're letting the prospect deal with all the objections, and you're allowing the prospect to say, no, I don't want to be a landlord. That's just a whole headache. You're the one, instead of being on the side who's making the argument for all the reasons on why someone should sell and why someone should meet with you and why someone should list it with you, you're actually doing the opposite of that and getting the prospect to argue as to why you're wrong and why they do need to meet with you. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So that helps your first, second call conversion. Let's flip that, because what is your conversion? Do you know your contact to lead conversion?
Yeah, so this is what's really cool. So my contact to lead conversion, oh, right. Okay, yeah. So that's 10% year to date.
Yeah.
From September to December, that hasn't changed much. It's still at 10%. We can go through all the other conversion ratios. There's some cool things that have changed, but sorry,
Well,
continue.
we're gonna go through them, right? So the next one is, so I want to associate each skill with each conversion. That's what we're doing. So we
Okay.
just talked about, Frank, and everybody else listening on the live, like the first call skills that will impact that first conversion from call to lead. We just talked about first call skills, right? And Dustin just talked about disqualifying. Okay. Now there's another skill. This next skill, or this next conversion, is lead to appointment set. What is your conversion?
Yeah, so this is going to sound crazy, but it's 47%.
It's amazing. I mean, the average is about 20. Yours is like over double that. So what are the skills and techniques that you're doing that allows you to have such a high conversion? What is it that you're doing with lead follow-up? How are you approaching these conversations? Walk us through the techniques and the skills.
Yeah, great question. So as we go through these numbers, you're going to see that there was a huge hole in my business at the beginning of the year, even though my listing set to or lead to listing set was super high, super great on the phone and getting people to agree with appointments.
Mm,
But my listing taken ratio was super low. Now, fast forward to the past quarter, a little over a quarter, I've actually been able to keep my listing appointment set ratio high at 43%. And I think a big reason for that is rather than like stuffing my pipeline like I might have been before, now I am very much more qualifying my leads. I'm closing a higher percentage of them, but I've also improved my follow up. So you mentioned follow up. Like I would say that's a big reason of why my listing set or sorry, lead to listing set ratio has stayed high is because I'm not just relying on like the first conversation. I'm continuing to follow up with them. I have a weekly newsletter I send out. I call them. I'm sending them a weekly text. They're getting mailers from me. Like people can't escape me unless they tell me they don't want me to reach out to them.
So that's a huge improvement, right? Because I think a lot of people live and die by this first contact, right? So they're pretty good at making the first call, and whatever appointments they get out of that first call, so be it. But then from there, they're losing a huge, huge opportunity. So what percentage of your appointments that you set come from the first call versus this pipeline that you're building? Just to give context of how important lead follow-up is.
Just kind of shooting from my hip, I would say probably like 80% come from the follow-up,
Wow.
20% might come from the first contact.
That's massive because most people that call expired is like more like 50-50. Yours is actually more from the pipeline. That I just want everyone to really, really, really pay attention to that. That's how important this thing is. So walk us through your lead follow-up one more time. So someone goes into your world, you get off a great call, they become a lead in your world. First off, how do you end that conversation such that you have a high likelihood of talking to that person again? Like, what are you doing at the end of the first call that leads you to have successful lead follow-up in the future?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm always asking for the appointment, right? You have to ask for the appointment. Now, if they don't accept, like if they don't, accept the appointment on the first call, then I am setting up a time for them to call, for me to call them about setting up an appointment. So the wording around that might just be like, totally get it, Brandon. When would it make sense for us to talk again about meeting together?
Love it.
And then they tell me when to call them back.
Yeah, cool. All right. So then what happens? So they say, yeah, call me back, call me back in a month. So what happens in Dustin's world? What's going to happen next?
Yeah. So I have, this is kind of what you teach, but I have my hot lead, my warm lead, and my seller nurture. And that's just dependent on their timeline. But essentially, they're getting a text from me every single Friday, just letting them know, hey, this is Dustin. Hope you're doing well. I'm available over the weekend. Let me know if you need anything. And then I send like a little picture of my business card just so that, because my business card has my face on it and I want them to remember my face over and over and over again.
Smart. Yep. Can I back up for 1 second? Do you send out you said you generate about 2 leads per day on average. Does that mean that those 2 leads every day are getting a handwritten thank you card as step 1 into the database?
Yes.
Okay, so you're sending out a handwritten thank you card. Anything that you're doing special there, or?
No, so it's funny. You teach to do the $1 scratch off ticket. I forgot to mention, I'm in Utah. You asked what market I am. Unfortunately, gambling is illegal in Utah, so we don't have any lottery tickets. So I've been on a search actually for something that has the same impact for such little money.
Yeah.
But right now, all I do is I do a handwritten thank you card and I put my business card in there. And again, my business card has my face on it.
Okay, got it. So now you sent out the thank you card. You talked about sending a weekly text message. What else are you doing?
So through that conversation, I'm going to set a date to call them back. Now, this is where I'm actually going to change some things here pretty soon. I was talking with Rob about some things to implement into my business that will keep me more organized. Right now, I have like a to-do list and like a date of like when I call them back. Instead, I'm going to just put into my calendar, like every single day I touch every single file so that I'm not letting anything slip through the cracks.
Yep.
That's kind of besides the point. If they're a hot lead, they're going to get something in the mail from me every single week. I have that set up through Mailbox Power.
Got it.
If they're a seller, same thing with warm leads. If they're a seller nurture, they're getting something in the mail from me every month.
Love it. And not to mention, like my favorite part about your lead follow-up, which you almost forgot, which is your weekly newsletter. It's probably one of the best weekly newsletters in the industry. Can we share the audience just to show them and what you're doing every week? Can you share your screen, or can you put it in the chat and I'll pull it up so people can look at it?
Yeah, here, I'll just type it in here.
Yeah. So I want you guys all to see this, right? I mean, you have taken this weekly email newsletter like the most serious that I wish other agents would like take as serious, because of how impactful this is and how important it is to the business. So let me just do this. Let me go. Oh, let me just try to do that one more time. So I think it should, there we go. Boom. All right. So check this out. So for all of you that are in the live audience, I'm going to share my screen. Boom, boom. So this is Dustin's weekly email newsletter, right? He calls it the Confessions of a Utah Realtor, right? And so how many people are on your in your database getting this weekly email?
Yeah, I think it's 295.
295, and it's growing by 2 people a day, right?
Yeah.
And so these are all his past episodes or his issues of his email newsletter. And so if we just look at this one, like there's an audio version of it, right? It's really, really, really well done. And you do all of this through Beehive, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And these are all the past episodes. I mean, this is really, really, really professional. This is a great email newsletter platform. And so talk to us about how that's impacted your business.
Yeah, it's been huge. It's kind of one of the things that I enjoy writing. I don't know, it helps me think through my thoughts. And so it's one of the things that when I joined your program, I realized that my skills aren't going to be where I want them to be right away. But that was one of the things that I committed to of like, okay, I'm not going to miss a single week of sending out a newsletter, even if it sucks, because right now my list is only 10 people, you know? So who cares? And I would say like a year later, it's been awesome. I mean, right now we're doing like a little giveaway challenge where if people refer their friends to it, it actually tracks if they use their link. And I'm doing a giveaway at the end of the month of like $100 Amazon gift card. And even just that has like increased the database by 10 people. Now, I
Awesome.
haven't, just to be completely transparent with people though, this doesn't take away from the cold calling. Like 285 of those people were from my calls.
That's
The
right.
other 10 people were just recently from people referring it.
So your
And
list building strategy is still through the call, but then
yeah,
you're allowing all these other things to nurture those leads to leverage your time so that they can see your content week after week after week after week. Over the course of a couple of years, you're going to have about 1,000 people on this list, and
yep,
then you get that snowball effect, right? So
that's my goal.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So cool. Okay. So two big things that contribute to a 47% lead to appointment set ratio. One, you're doing a much better job of disqualifying who you consider a lead. And then B, you just walked us through what you're doing from a lead follow-up perspective. Now, let's
Yep.
talk about your appointment set to appointment met ratio. What is the conversion there?
Yeah. So let's see. Do you want me to? So from since September, it's 33%. Year to date, it is 41%. So it's actually gone down a little bit, something that I want to work on. But I can tell you that like a lot of the appointments that I'm going on over the phone, there have been multiple recently where through the second conversation, I actually find out that, you know what, I'm not a good fit for this. I disqualify them a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I'm not trying to make excuses there. I'd like to see that go up to 50%, but I still feel like 33% is okay for where I'm at right now.
Yeah, so which means that for every 10 appointments you're setting, you're actually going on about 3 of those, to be
Yeah.
fair. Yeah. So what do you do? Like if someone says, yeah, I want to meet you, it's Monday, call it. I want to meet with you on Friday. What are you doing to drive that conversion? Because there's a lot of meat on the bone for most of you that get really good at getting people to verbalize, yeah, I'll meet with you, but then they never meet with you. So this will probably be a big area of focus for you and I next year to really increase this. But what are you doing right now?
So right now I am calling them the day of, making sure that I confirm the appointment. That's super important because sometimes it's like an hour drive for me. And so I don't want to go on that unless I've, heard from them. I do also have a text that is actually automated. It just sends out a day before and says, hey, just a reminder, here's our appointment at this time. But then I am calling them as well. I was bringing like crumble cookie to their house for a while. And I think maybe that's why it used to be higher and now it's dipped a little bit. I stopped doing that just because, again, part of like focusing in and on what I knew worked, I kind of cut some things out that were taking up a lot of my time, especially with these appointments that like are an hour away.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting, I actually hadn't even thought about that until we're having that conversation right now, that maybe that attributes to that a little bit.
Yeah, perhaps. And my other question from a coaching perspective, not to get down a rabbit hole, but like, what does the appointment qualification conversation sound like? Right? Like one of my favorite things to do. Here's a good takeaway for everybody in the live audience. So get ready to write something down. Like if I'm going to set an appointment with somebody, I have to give them the opportunity to bail. I have to give them the opportunity to tell me they actually don't want to meet. Right? And so like that could sound a couple different ways. It could be like, well, Dustin, I've got you on my calendar for Thursday. And so a lot of times, and I don't think this will be the case here, but a lot of times people will set meetings with me that they never plan to attend. And so you're not going to hang up the phone and then Thursday comes and goes and I never hear from you again, are you?
Yeah.
And then they say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, are you sure? Because I don't want to feel like I've pressured you into meeting with me unless you see some real value in having this conversation with an agent as myself. You could totally tell me, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. I'd rather not meet. And if that's the case, it's totally fine. And I get them to say, nope. I do actually, in fact, want to meet with you. How well do you feel like you're doing that?
I would say maybe like 60% there,
Okay.
like I do disqualify them. But I'd like to get to the point where I'm specifically saying those words that you just said. I think that I can make it a little bit more impactful.
Yeah. And you just bring some humor to it, right? And so like, it's like, listen, I get it. I mean, you may hang up the phone and say, what have I just done? I've just set an appointment with a realtor and just want to cancel automatically. So that's fine. I'd rather have that conversation now. But I'm going to move some things around to make sure that I'm prepared, that you get the most value from our time together. And I just don't want you to ever feel as though, wow, do I really want to meet with this guy? And if I don't, I promise, you could tell me. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I'd rather us, cancel now versus having to get to Thursday and it kind of be weird. And I really get the prospect to say, no, I appreciate that, Brandon. But no, you sound like the type of person that we do absolutely want to meet with. So that's a whole nother conversation. All right. Now let's transition to listing appointment met. You're on a listing appointment. And your closing ratio, how many of those do you actually get signed? What is your closing ratio?
Yeah, so this is where I've seen the biggest improvement, Brandon, and I'm so glad because this is where I was like beating my head against the table for so long.
I remember.
Yeah, year to date, it's like, so when I take into account the entire year, including earlier in the year where it was probably lower than this, it's 20%. So it doesn't look too good, right? But for the past 4 months since September, it's been 50%. So still, I mean, I'd like it to get above 50%.
Sure.
But I've made some huge improvements recently, thank goodness. And it's helped me a lot in my business.
So tell us, what have you done? And then we're going to open this up for Q&A. So if you guys have questions, you guys can start to raise your hands. But Dustin, let's take a few minutes and talk about what are the things you've improved at the listing appointment that's helped to increase the number of people who say, yeah, we want to hire you, we want to move forward.
Yeah, I think... it's difficult. I think part of it is just putting in the reps, like it's just inevitable. Yeah. I was talking with an agent in the group about this the other week that, you can't expect yourself to, my goal was to make 100,000 this year.
Yep.
And next year I hope to make much more than that. But this year it was 100,000. But I got frustrated at month 6 because I was like, well, shoot, I'm not going to make 100,000 because we're halfway through the year and I haven't made 50 grand. Right. But that's the wrong way to look at it. Like you are on this journey of improving. You might make this might blow. It blew my mind, at least when I pulled the numbers here. Of that 140, 94,000 was made from September on.
That's right.
And so
and that's the thing. That's why agents don't see that that's what's going to happen, this exponential hockey stick growth, and they quit right before they're about to explode because they go for so long without seeing results. That's why I tell everybody, stop looking up the mountain. Keep your head down. Just keep it down. Keep putting in the work, putting in the reps, putting in the reps, putting in the reps, putting in the reps. And it takes about 6 months without seeing anything. And then boom, this huge explosion. And then guess what else happens? That agent that continues to be successful, year 2, it's another massive explosion. This is what we call the accumulation effect or the compound effect. It's nothing, boom, exponential growth. To your point, September, October, November, we're shooting this on December 3rd. In 4 months, you've generated $94,000 in income, where your whole year, you're at 140. So I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe 80 to 90% of your income has come in the last 100 days.
Yeah.
And had you quit before September, you would have made what this year? 30 grand?
40K.
40K. Had you would have said, you know what? I'm going to let me chase the next shiny object. This cold calling, this Brandon character, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm off to do something else. You would have missed $94,000 worth of income that's come in the last 100 days. That is so, so impactful. Keep going. I digress.
No, you're good. Took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I wanted to touch on that because when you talk about like a whole year in review, it can, especially if you're new to this, it can be very discouraging to get to month 6. But the thing is, like, I was telling another agent this that like I don't remember how far they're in they are, but let's say you're 3 months in, you don't deserve yet to make 20 grand a month. Like, I'm sorry, like that, I, great person, like I want you to make that kind of money, but you just haven't put in the work yet. Your skills haven't been refined enough yet to make that kind of money. You will get there, but it's going to take time. It's going to take action. And so that's the biggest thing that I would say is like, you talk a lot about this, but it's the law of large numbers, right? It averages out overall, but like you're saying, it's going to be a hockey stick.
Yeah, and that's so well said. This sense of, and I don't want to offend anybody in the industry. I know you guys are working your tails off. This sense of entitlement, to your point, it's like, well, I've been doing this, I've been prospecting for 2 months, where if you look at people outside of real estate that make $20,000 a month, they've got, you know, a 4-year undergrad degree, then they've got a doctorate degree, and then they've got 8 years as an intern. They're 42 years old before they start making real money, like an orthopedic surgeon that makes 250 grand a year. They're 15 years in the game before they start making 20 grand a year. But realtors, for some reason, hey, I've been doing this for a couple weeks. Why am I not? It's like, dude, where's the entitlement coming from? What makes you so special? Like, why do you think you deserve to make all this money without putting forth years and years and years and years and years of blood, sweat, and tears? Anyway, I digress. Going back to the listing appointment, give us 1-2 tactical things that you say, man, Brandon, these have been the biggest game changers for me. When I do this at a listing appointment, it really makes an impact.
Yeah. I would say setting the agenda has been pretty important for me, especially recently, like in this journey of trying to figure out what was wrong with my closing rate. I think that was a big deal. And specifically when I say that is like at the very beginning of the meeting, I want them to verbalize whether or not, like, let's just say we are a perfect fit. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but let's say we get to the end of this and we both feel really good about moving forward with each other. Is there anything holding you back from getting started right away? Right? I want to hear their answer to that because pretty much right away, I'm going to know how this conversation is going to go based off of that answer.
Yep.
So that's been a huge thing.
So closing at the beginning instead of the end, that's one good tact. If I'm listening to this, I'm saying, okay, God, I got to learn how to close at the beginning. Stop waiting for this big fireworks show at the end. I got to close at the beginning of the appointment. Okay, got it. Give us one more.
I think the other thing is the whole pricing presentation.
Yeah.
I would say like when I meet with sellers, that is the thing that people are blown away by, that they just are like, wow, we've met with 10 other agents and nobody has gone into this amount of detail with price bracketing, you know, buyer analysis, things like that. Like they just have never even heard of that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. You've outlined it in a way and trained us to communicate these things that they've never heard of in a very simple and easy way to understand, yet they've still never heard it. And so I would say that's been a huge thing.
And how much time do you spend on, you know, you're going to put the listing on this website, you're going to do drone photos, you're going to do, you know, this, that, zero. See, that's the thing. When the presentation has no substance of any real value, then you have to BS your way through marketing. So you're going there as a relatively new agent, competing with agents that have way more experience. I got a lot of really good friends in your market that you are beating for these listings, and you spend zero time spending on marketing the home, right?
Yeah, another agent in my office actually asked, like, we were kind of role playing the listing presentation because he wants to improve his, and he asked like, where's your like value proposition? Like, I don't get it. Like,
I know.
That's that my brokerage teaches is like you should have a page about your value proposition. And I thought about it. I was like, you know, I guess my whole presentation is my value proposition.
That's exactly right. I'm going to get to Q&A. So I don't see any hands yet. So get them up. I started coaching this agent that's been doing this for 20 years. He said the same thing to me. It's an agent's bias towards this. They themselves believe the BS. They themselves believe, okay, me putting this house on Facebook is the thing that's going to sell the house. No, no. We talk about the things that actually sell real estate. That's what we talk about, the appointment. That is the reason, because it's so different as to why people list homes with us. Where
Right.
all the other agents that are talking about 3D photos, this and drone photo, that's not the needle mover. That's not how you sell real estate. Those things are hopefully designed to try to impress a seller because there's
Yep.
nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
We still do some of those
Of course.
things,
Those
but
are the
it's like,
given. That's a given. It's like, wait, outside of that stuff, Mr. Seller, I mean, every agent does that. Every agent does that. That's no different, right? So anyway, that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. All right. So you got 10 minutes for some good questions from the group?
yeah, of course.
Awesome. All right. Of course, our first question is from a non-video, non-name Zoom user. Of course, that is how it goes. So Zoom user with no name and no face, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This was really helpful for me because it really helped. Because it's so easy to always think negative, especially when you're not getting the results you feel like deserve or you work hard towards. So it was really helpful for me. And then my question is, when did everything start to click for you? At what point did you like, yeah, I'm starting to get this, or did everything start to go together? Because I see like for me, it's like here and there I learn it feels like it's slow. That's what I'm so when did everything start to click?
Yeah. So Dominic, he shared something with me that really impacted me. You have to think of this business as like pushing a freight train. You use the word slow. I think your name's Chris, right?
Yeah, his name's Chris.
Okay, he's muted, I guess. So Chris, thinking of it as like pushing a freight train, like it's gonna be really, really, really slow at the beginning. You're gonna feel like it's a lot of work, but once you get that first listing sign and then that second listing, now I'm at the point where like I'm consistently signing 2 listings a month, and I'd like to get to 3 or 4, right? But right now, I'm just like, my broker knows that I need to sign 2 listings a month and he keeps me accountable and I text him. So once you start getting to that point, like the train is already moving, it starts to carry itself and it becomes way easier. So I apologize. I think I kind of digressed there. I can't remember exactly your question, but
The question was like, how long did it take for you to really, really? So we talk about the 4 levels of learning, right? And so the first level is this like unconscious incompetence. Like they're just really excited. Chris was just here. Chris was just like, let's go. He just quit his full-time job. I want to be a full-time realtor. And I think he's probably in phase 2, which is that deception phase of like, oh shit, what did I just do? I don't know if I'm going to be able to. And then phase 3 is this conscious competence where it's like, okay, things are starting to click. How long did that take you to get to phase 3 is his question.
I mean, shoot, I would say probably about 9 months.
Yeah.
You know,
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yep. 6 to 9 months to be very, very, very transparent and honest, 6 to 9 months of doing the actual work at a extremely high level. You can't not be consistent and then bitch that it doesn't work. Yeah. So that's 6 to 9 months of actually putting forth insane amounts of effort. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's why I like that visual of the train, because it's a lot of work, but once it gets going, it's
hard to stop.
Yeah, it's hard to stop. So
that's right. Xavier's, I got to keep it clean. You got a little young man on the call with us. Go ahead, Xavier.
Chris, I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, crap. I mean, 6 to 9 months. That's that's a big mind there. Mind F there.
Truth.
But anyways, question was, well, actually before that, Dustin, thank you so much for this. I needed this a lot. Every single day, this Confessions of Listing Agents just really helps me remember that it's not yet, keep going mentality.
That's right.
Anyways, my question was for the qualifying, disqualifying. I know it's a process. Would you recommend that we build some of that skill set early on so that way our pipeline is actually somewhat qualified, or do you think there's a point where we should wait it and put it off until a certain point?
Yeah, great question. I don't know. My initial response to that, and Brandon probably can answer this better than I would, but my initial response is like, don't overthink it. Just get out there, do the work. you're going to learn these things as you go. You know what I mean? Yes,
Let me help his. I'll help you guys ask better questions so Dustin can give you guys better answers. I think what Xavier is asking is, in the early days, should he worry about qualifying or disqualifying, or should he focus on quantity before he starts worrying about quality? That's what he's asking.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about quality. It's just, yeah, the quantity, putting in as many reps as possible, because through that process, you're going to learn. Like, there's no better way to learn how to do this business than to do it over and over and over again. And you will learn those things. Now, with that being said, like, I would still listen to what Brandon teaches and listen to what Dominic teaches and try to implement those things, of course. You know what I mean? But yeah, like, just try to get in front of, at the end of the day, like, the silver bullet to this business, if there is one, is just getting in front of as many people as possible that are looking to sell their home.
Yep. 100%. And I just say that there's the path in the beginning, in the early days, Xavier, is to do exactly that. Don't worry about this sales skill or that sale. That comes with time. Right now is you want to fail as early and as often as you possibly can, which means appointment, unqualified, doesn't matter. Just get in front of as many people as possible by saying the least amount of possible on the phone. And over that process is when the learning really takes place. All right. Next question is from, I don't know who, someone's driving with iPhone. Yeah.
It's me. It's Sam.
Oh, what's up, Sam?
Yeah. Dustin, this is going to be either a really good question or a terrible one. You'll have to decide. But I think I've told you before, I just love your tonality. Like, if I'm the prospect, I'm just immediately disarmed from the beginning. You don't sound like a salesperson at all. And it's really, I feel like I would let you set the appointment, no problem. Now, I get the feeling some of that comes naturally to you, but like, from a tactical standpoint, is that something that you practice? And if so, how can I get more like that? Because naturally, I'm more of a driver, and I tend to like walk all over the prospect.
Great question.
Shoot, man, like, I feel like a lot of it is just kind of natural for me. One thing that I did tell another agent the other week was, like, sometimes when we get somebody on the phone, we like lean in, like, physically, like, let's say we were prospecting together and I might see you on Zoom, like, lean forward and like get really intense. I kind of do the opposite. Like, when I get somebody on the phone, I lean back in my chair and cross my arms and just kind of go back and forth like this. You know, now if their energy is super high, then I will stand up and like start walking around. I just try and match their energy. Maybe that's the advice I'd have, is just try and mirror people as much as possible. But like, if you find yourself like putting forward too much energy, then maybe just try doing that. Just physically, like, lean back in your chair and just kind of chill out a little bit.
It's great. I would say that for any drivers like Sam, because Sam is a very, very high driver, the key lever to influence is actually listening.
Yeah.
That is like one of the best secrets of like how to actually become a phenomenal salesperson. You can say nothing and someone says, wow, you're a great salesperson. Why? Because nobody listens. Everyone sucks at listening. So if you can really work as a driver, maybe you put tape over your mouth or something in your prospecting station, you will become so much more influential versus having to be the one to butt in and bulldoze people.
Yeah.
Kamal, go ahead.
Hey, Brandon. Just want to thank you again for just all of the great value that you've been giving for the program, and Dustin as well for your advice. My question is kind of off. I want to know, Brandon, how can I connect with you more on a one-on-one like you're doing with Dustin? I hear you say a lot, like, when we would talk in the beginning and I've seen you get better, how can I kind of have that relationship to sharpen my skills with you?
Yeah, so it's actually coming to the Monday coaching call is how you do it.
Okay.
There's no, and Dustin, you can speak to this too. This is what I encourage people to do. I do one-on-one calls with everybody every Monday. Ask me how many people take advantage of that. This Monday, we have 800 people in the community. Guess how many people took a one-on-one with me on Monday? 4. You see, the reason why we do the call the way we do the call is you have the opportunity to do a one-on-one with me every week for the rest of your life. And it happens every Monday. And so what Dustin, when I say us having conversation, Dustin, you could speak to this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you are on every Monday coaching call, right? And you would always like have something to work through with me every Monday. Is that true?
Yeah. Yep. And I'm always taking notes. Even if I don't have something, I'm taking notes on what other people are getting feedback on.
Yeah. So my challenge, Kamal, is I think that the perception is, again, you have the opportunity all week to register whatever we need to work through. And I will give you as much time as you need on those Monday calls. And so that's what they're designed to do. It's designed to be in an interaction, just like Dustin and I are doing right now, Zoom, face to face, just like this. And oh, by the way, the reason why I do them that way is it helps everybody else learn at the same time, which speeds up the process of learning. Because guess what? How nice was it for you just to hear the conversation that I just had with Dustin for the last hour? Was that helpful at all?
Absolutely.
Well, guess what?
Absolutely.
What if only Dustin and I did this and you weren't invited? And then you had to think about all the questions that Dustin just gave you. How long would that take you? And oh, by the way, you've got access to 5 years worth of these conversations right now in the portal that you don't have to come up and wait to try to come up with things to ask. You already have access to everything. So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it does.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does. Thank you.
No problem. All right. We'll take one more from Andrew and then we'll respect Dustin your time. We'll get you back out of here.
Brandon, thanks. Dustin, I really like your newsletter. And I think it was maybe a couple months ago, you were on a similar call with Brandon about maybe whittling down the content a little bit. Maybe it was a Monday call. Did you do that? It looks like maybe you did that. And then the second part of that question is, what kind of feedback do you get from your database regarding it? What kind of impact do you see? Or do you see it just more of like keeping your face in front of your leads?
Yeah. So great question. I'll kind of break some cool stats down for you guys. Over the past month, my average open rate has been 48%. Okay. So I'll talk about like the feedback because I know that's your question, but I just want to make a point here that if I have 290, let's just round up 300 people on my email list and I hit a button every week to send that to 300 people, that means 150 people are opening it. And there's probably an extra, I don't know, at least 50 people that are at least seeing it in their email and not opening it. So I would say like number one, it keeps me top of mind, right? Now, how many people like respond to the email? I don't know. I get like a couple responses a month that are just like, hey, love this edition. Would love to talk with you in January, right? So like I actually have a pretty good amount of people that I'm following up with next month that have responded to this newsletter. So the feedback's been really good. In terms of whittling it down, yes, I have tried to implement that because yes, you're right. Brandon and I had a conversation on a Monday coaching call about him just saying like, if there's anything I would improve, just like try and condense it a little bit. So I try and like make separate publications for like each section that I used to have in my newsletter. It's not always perfect. Sometimes I do write a slightly longer one, but I try to keep them like pretty short now.
And have you seen you haven't seen any difference, I'm guessing, from the reaction from your database by doing that, right? I mean, simpler seems like it's probably just as effective as the lengthy version.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would say my open rate kind of swings between like 30 to 50%. I'd say I've seen it recently hovering more close to like the 40 and upper 40%. So you could probably say that since I've made some of those changes, it has made an impact. Just for context, like a good open rate, like industry average is like 30%.
That's right.
You can get anything above that, then you know you're doing something right.
And Andrew, I'll just add on, it's all about the packaging, less about what's in the package. So if you can have a really, 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 really good subject line or title and a good subtitle and a good opening line, that's everything. So whether or not the thing is 4.5 pages long or 2 sentences, if you get those three things right, you'll have a really good open rate, really good engagement rate. And then the other thing that he said that's absolute, like so valuable is forget all of that. He hits a button every week and he's able to do a lead follow-up touch with 50% of the people that in this case would take him 15 hours. Remember he said how many people he talks to every week? It takes him 15 hours to talk to 100 people. He's doing 150 touches with the click of a button, right? And so that's why we like it. So it's not direct response. It's not, I send this email out and I book 14 appointments. That's not the point of it. The point of it is to leverage top of mind awareness with a free click of a button.
Love it. Brilliant. Nice job, Dustin.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dude, this is great. Another really, really good conversation. I just, it's so much value that you guys are pouring back into the community. Man, thank you. Thank you, Dustin, for doing this, truly.
Thank you, Brandon. Do you mind if I just close with one more thing I wanted to share with everyone?
Sure.
So, listen, like, I think it was just last week we had Mark on, right? He's making $500K a year. And I just want to say this, that like, I'm kind of at the beginning of this explosion, I feel like, and every single one of you can have that same result, but you have to put in the 9 months that Brandon talked about. There's this quote that I love from Alex Hormozi. He says, there is no silver bullet to a successful business. It's 1,000 golden BBs. So hang with me for a second. Those golden BBs is everything that Brandon teaches. Chances are, if you're in this group, you already know what those golden BBs are. They're the things that you're refusing to do. So maybe it's cold calling, but maybe it's not cold calling. Maybe you're making your calls, but you're not doing your handwritten thank you cards. There are certain things that I wasn't doing before September that were just very small, like tactical things. And all of those things stack together. And that's what ends up winning you the business. So you can't like spend 9 months doing something saying that it didn't work if you only implemented 10%. You have to move fast, implement as much as you can from what Brandon and all these coaches are teaching us. That's what I like to leave you with.
Dustin, amazing, dude. Well said. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys next Tuesday. You guys have a great day.